I'm Julie, and this is going to be my first tutorial. I'm doing it on Simplicity 5461, the 22-inch bear, and this will be a memory bear that I do volunteer work with the hospice to make. So I have my pieces all cut out. This is the head piece, here are the ears, the arm, another head piece, the legs, last head piece. This is the front of the body, more of the legs and arms, soles of the feet, and this is the back of the body. So what I'm going to be specifically doing is showing how to go around the curves and how I pin everything up to make it easier to sew. This particular bear is going to be made out of a sweatshirt material, and it's light pink, so I'm going to get my sewing machine ready and let you see how I do it. Okay, so we're going to start with the way that the Simplicity pattern starts, which is to stitch the head side sections together. So these are the head side. I'm just going to take my pattern off. And I'll put these right sides together. So right now they're wrong sides together. I'm going to flip them around. Put the right sides together, matching these double notches. I always cut out the notches. Some people don't like to use them. Some people like to mark their fabric rather than using the notches. But even though I'm a pretty big pinner, this is one step that I don't usually pin, although you can pin it if it makes you more comfortable. It's just a simple seam, and I'm going to sew right along here. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and do that, and I'll be back. Okay, I have stitched the two head side pieces together. This pattern uses a 1/4 inch seam, so I've stitched those two together. So now we have this piece that is sort of bat looking. The next step in doing this is to use the head center and attach it to the head sides. Now here comes the part where I do a lot of pinning, and this is actually a particularly difficult step because it's very hard to line everything up at a 1/4 inch seams. So I usually take this head center piece and fold it in half so that I can make sure that I'm matching the center of this to the center of my head sides. So that would be the seam. So I just put these right sides together, the seam against the very center of the head center, and pin. I try to pin so that the pin points are going to be toward the needle because the pin heads often get caught up in the sewing machine. So I forgot to clip the little notches on this one, but that's okay. So I generally then match up the very corner on each side, and then I sort of make everything fit. And I'll tell you that this step is probably the most difficult in the entire bear, and I often take the pins out and repin several times before I get this right. This is pretty important for the face of the bear to look nice and to have a nice seam where the eyes actually go on at the very end. So this actually matched up pretty well. If you're using a really stretchy fabric, like a knit, this is a knit, but it's kind of thicker, so it's not too bad. But if you're using a really stretchy fabric, a walking foot is really helpful to keep everything in line. And also, if you're using a fabric that's very light and delicate, or is just sort of silky, you can use interfacing on the back to help stabilize the piece, and it really does help when you're constructing the bear to have that interfacing. And that would be something like rayon or other just silky light materials that don't hold up well to all this curved stitching. So I've got this pretty much pinned up, and you can see that I really like to put a lot of pins in here to keep everything in place. So I'm going to go stitch this seam all the way around slowly, and I will show you what I'm doing when I do that. So now I'm over at my sewing machine. You can see I have a pink thread to coordinate with the pink fabric, and I have a Brother CS6000I, and my needle is over at the left side. I prefer this because it's easier for me to see the 1/4 inch. Right here there's a clear part on the foot that's a 1/4 inch, but set up your machine so that you have an easy way to know what a 1/4 inch seam is. And when I get to the curves, I'm just going to gently move the fabric with both hands. You don't really need to force it, you just need to guide it. And I often stop and make sure that these back pieces are not getting caught in the stitching. So I'm just bringing it around here. A lot of people take out the pins as they go. I do if they get in the way. I sew over them if they seem to be out of the way. And you can lift the presser foot and move the fabric around if necessary. There's quite a lot of fabric right at the nose, so you may need to kind of shift it around and put the presser foot back down to make sure that you don't catch any of the other fabric underneath. This pin is caught. So my best advice for this part is just to go slow and stop when you need to. You can stop and lift the presser foot with the needle down and move the fabric to accommodate the curves. But it doesn't need to be speedy. This is really important to get a nice curve, a nice seam, because it really is what everyone's going to see on your bear right in the face. Okay, and show you the stitching close here of the head piece. So if we just turn this right side out, you can start to see how the bear head will look. This is going to be the nose right up in front, and the eyes will go somewhere around here, and then the back of the head will connect, and the ears will be up near this seam. So next up is the ears. So I've just lightly pinned these with the right sides together. I have 2 ears here. And I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch seam along the curved side only, the big curved side. Then we will turn them inside out and stuff them and attach them. So right now I'm going by the Simplicity pattern instructions, the order that they give. A lot of times I find that it's easier to do all the simple seams first and then do the more complicated seams and then put everything together. But I'm going to go in order of the patterns so that you can follow along if you have this pattern. Okay. So I will sew this up, and I've only used minimal pins here just to keep the fabric from sliding. Again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. And this is just totally curved, it's like a half circle, so I'm just going to continuously push the fabric in a curved motion toward the needle. And don't worry if it's not perfect. I think that a little bit of, imperfection in the ears is really cute. So these bears definitely have a personality after you've completed them. I am someone who definitely believes in going by the book, and I do clip my seams. I don't go crazy with it. I just clip a few notches, but I find that it really helps, especially with something small like ears. There's not a lot of room in there for turning the seam, and you're not going to top stitch it down, so it definitely makes a difference for how they look after you've turned them and stuffed them. This makes the seam nice and smooth and not bulky looking. So just cut out a few little notches there so you have a nice smooth seam when we turn this inside out. So now I'm going to turn it inside out and push my fingers into the seam. Some people like to use a tool for this. I find my fingers to be sufficient. And then I'm going to grab my polyfill, and for this I am using the polyfill brand polyester fiber fill. This is my favorite polyfill so far. Really is nice and soft and easy to work with. So I grab a piece of it, and I just take off a small piece and stuff the ears. And I stuff them, decently full. I definitely have to kind of shove the stuffing in there. If you don't have them stuffed quite enough, they're a little bit floppy. If you have them stuffed too much, it gets very difficult to baste and sew this open end. But I generally, figure out if it's how I want by just kind of pinching this together and feeling whether it's soft or firm enough. I'm just going to add just a little bit more, make it a little more firm, kind of force this into there's no corners, but if there were, I'd be forcing it into the corners. And I'm just going to pinch this end together and just use a couple of pins to secure it so I don't have to hold it the whole time. So I do follow the instructions and I do baste and then attach, but I suppose if you are confident you can skip that step and go straight to attaching it to the head. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Get my scissors off of here. And I'm going to increase my stitch length to the max stitch length. And I'm just going to sew this down. And I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here, and I'm not going to back stitch at all. All we want to do is just tack this down, and I leave a little bit of thread on the ends so I get this tacked down. Take these pins out. You can get this tacked down stuffed ear, which we then are going to attach to the head. So I will finish up with the second ear and then I'll show you how to attach the ear to the head. Okay, so I've got my stitched head here, head front, and I have 2 little pink ears. We're going to attach them to the head. Now, on the pattern there are dots, and the instructions say to match the dots. So there's a large dot at the edge of the ear, and a large dot like right on the center of the head, and then a small dot at the other edge of the ear, and a small dot on the head side. I don't generally use them. I usually just eyeball where I want the ear. It's personal preference. If you want the ears closer together, you can put them closer together. If you want them further apart, you can put them further apart. So I just am going to match up the edges, and this can be a little bit difficult because the ear is already stuffed, but the basting does help to kind of keep everything together. So I put the two ends, and then I sort of match the center, just making sure that I'm kind of got these three layers all matched up. It takes a little bit of pulling and tugging, but we can get them there. Alright, that's pretty close. So I'm going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam, so it'll be beyond my basting stitch. So we don't want the basting to show. You can take it out, but I usually don't because I'm kind of lazy, so I just stitch the basting closer to the seam and the seam at the 1/4 inch so we don't see the basting. I'll bring this over to the sewing machine. Okay. So same thing as before, I'm just going to go slowly, and I'm now going through stuffing, so my machine has to work a little harder. And I forgot to bring the stitch length back down to normal. So, stitching, and just be careful it doesn't get caught. So now we have the ear attached to the head with the seam. Mine is about 1/2 inch in, a little bit more, like 5/8 of an inch in. So I'm just going to match that on the other side. So we have 2 ears attached. Okay, so now I have the bare head with 2 ears attached, and we're going to set that aside for now, and we're going to work with the head back. I'm going to take my pattern off of here. And I have cut out the notches on this one, so you can see there's 3 on the center back seam. So we're going to, right now they're wrong sides together, so we're going to put them right sides together. Just matching up the seams and the notches all the way up to the point. So again, I usually don't pin this seam. I'm just going to stitch it up, and then we will connect the back of the head to the front of the head that has the ears. Okay, so I've gotten the back of the head sewn together, and I just made a couple of clips so that it lays flat when we open it up. So this is the back of the head. Now we're going to take the back of the head and the front of the head that has the ears attached, and we're going to put them right sides together. Now here's another place where it's going to be really important to match up all the seams correctly. I generally start with the neck part, the round part, and it should have notches in the other half, but I forgot to cut them. So I'm just going to pin this to match up these corners here. So I'll pin that, and then matching also the seams in the center. I have the centers together, so you have like this sandwich like that. Like I said, I believe in a lot of pinning. I find that things go much more smoothly when you use more pins than fewer. I do mostly to hold everything in place while I'm matching up the rest of it. Move this back a little. Okay, so now I'm going to go along the sides, matching these notches here, and I'm just going to pin up where the seam is going to be. And like I said with the other curves on the face, this sometimes takes several tries of pinning and taking out. I often go from both sides to try and keep everything even. Sometimes that works out well, sometimes it doesn't work out well and I have to start over again. So don't be discouraged if you do have to pin it a couple of times, because it's much easier to pin a couple of times than it is to rip stitches a couple of times. So you want to have everything nice and secure before you start stitching so that you will be successful. So the ears go inside, and again we're going to make kind of like a sandwich. It'll be a lot of layers of fabric, but as long as the fabric isn't too thick, we shouldn't have a problem. So I'm just going to sort of match up the sides here and make sure that we're not overlapping. You want them nice and flush. I think it's a little bit difficult to pin through so many layers. So I'm going to stick this ear inside as well. Just pin this up. Just making sure we're going to capture, all of these layers. And that's pretty close. That's pretty good. Just a couple more pins and we'll be ready to stitch up this seam. Got myself a little bit. Okay. So now we're going to move back over to the sewing machine. And stitch this seam up. So this is another place where, it pays just to take your time, and if you need to stop and reposition, that's always fine. That's a good thing to do. Like I said, I just gently guide the fabric. When you get to the part where the ears are, you're going to have a lot more fabric to sew through. So you want to go slower, and you need to press down the ear so that it doesn't get in the way. So I'm going to make a nice seam over the ear. And I have to remove these pins as I go because they get in the way and they get stuck. So you just want to make sure you're catching all the layers underneath and that you're not catching any of the back of the head in your seam. So I'm just about through the first ear here. Just continuing on. And if at all possible, you want to split this seam open so that you sew it flat rather than to one side. Just makes it a little bit neater and cleaner. You can pin that open if you need to, or press it open if that works better for you. Just taking these pins out as I go, especially in the ear. And at least with my machine, when this is so thick, it does need a little bit more of a heavy hand to guide the fabric. I have to help the feed dogs by pushing the fabric through rather than just letting it, guide itself. Okay. Okay, so I actually ran out of bobbin thread back there, so I had to switch, and I didn't have any light pink yarn or thread, so I switched to a darker pink thread, which has the added bonus of allowing you to see it a little better. So now I have the front of the head stitched to the back of the head, and I'm just going to turn this right side out. So now you have, this is the back, and the front of the unstuffed bear head with the ears attached. So if you have done this all pretty closely, this opening is going to match perfectly or pretty close to the body opening, and when we get later, this is the last step of the process in putting the bear together, it's going to be really important. So it's important to follow the different things that I mentioned, especially the 1/4 inch seam on these seams when you're putting everything together, because that's accounted for when you get this circle, and matching up the sides well so that you have a nice smooth transition from one piece to the next, and you don't have a lot of, see, this one's off just a tiny bit, which won't make a difference, but it was off maybe a 1/4 inch or more, then you're going to have trouble, attaching it to the body when it comes to that point. So that is how you construct the head, and I will move on and show you how to put together the arms and legs and the body parts. So I'll be back for that, and then we will attach everything together and have our bear.